On my son's wedding morning, our family driver suddenly shoved me into the trunk and covered me with a blanket. I panicked, shouting, "What are you doing?" But he whispered urgently, "Ma'am, please, stay quiet, you need to see this." My heart was racing as I lay there in the dark, barely daring to breathe. Minutes later, I peeked through a small crack, and what I saw outside made my entire body go cold. In that instant, I realized this wedding was hiding something far darker than I ever imagined. And I wasn't supposed to find out. I was eagerly waiting to see my son walk down the aisle on his wedding day. Suddenly, our family driver pushed me into the trunk of his car, covering me with a blanket. "What the hell are you doing?" I hissed. He whispered urgently, "Hide in here. There is something you need to see." Trust me. Against every instinct, I did. What I witnessed through that crack in the trunk left me paralyzed with horror. The morning of my son's wedding, I stood in my bedroom staring at a dress I had picked out 3 months ago. It was navy blue and elegant, the kind of thing a mother wears when she is overflowing with pride. I should have been excited. I should have been crying happy tears and calling my friends to say, "Can you believe my Blake is finally getting married?" But I was not. Instead, I stood with my hand pressed against my chest, feeling my heartbeat thud too fast and too loud. Something felt fundamentally wrong. I could not put a name to the sensation, but it sat in the pit of my stomach like a cold, heavy, and unwelcome stone. Bernard would have known what to do. My husband had been gone for 3 years, but I still caught myself thinking that way, wishing he were here so I could turn to him and ask if he felt it too. But Bernard was not here. And Blake, my sweet and trusting Blake, was downstairs getting ready to marry Natasha Quinn. She was beautiful and polished, and she always said all the right things. And yet I shook my head, pushed the thought away, and reached for my earrings. "Stop it, Margot," I told myself. "You are just being paranoid." I was fastening the second earring when I heard the sound of gravel crunching outside. It was Frederick's car. He was early, arriving at 7:30 when we were not supposed to leave for another 20 minutes. I grabbed my purse and headed downstairs. When I stepped outside, the morning air hit me. It was warm and sweet, the kind of spring day that made you believe in new beginnings. But Frederick's face told a vastly different story. He stood beside the black sedan, his jaw clenched tight. Frederick Palmer had worked for our family for 15 years. He had driven Bernard to his very last meeting, and he had driven me to the hospital the night Bernard died. Frederick never panicked, but right now he looked like a man who was barely holding himself together. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, his voice low and urgent. "You need to hide right now." I froze halfway down the driveway, confused. "What?" "Please," he said, stepping closer as fear flickered in his eyes. "Get in the back seat. Cover yourself with a blanket. Do not make a sound." "Frederick, what are you doing?" I asked. His voice cracked as he responded. "I made a promise to Mr. Bernard. I promised I would look after you and Blake. Right now, I am asking you to trust me, please." The mention of Bernard's name hit me like a physical punch. Frederick never invoked Bernard's memory lightly. I looked toward the house, knowing Blake would be coming out any second, smiling and happy, ready to marry the woman he loved. Or rather, the woman he thought he loved. "Frederick," I whispered, "what did you find out?" His throat worked as he struggled to speak. "Not here. Not now. But you need to hear something before Blake walks down that aisle, and he cannot know you are listening." My hand shook. "What are you talking about?" I pleaded. Frederick opened the back door. The interior of the car smelled of leather and lavender. "Get in," he said. "I will explain, but we are running out of time." I stared at that open door, at the blanket folded on the seat, and then at Frederick's face. This was a man who had been family for 15 years, who had never lied to me, and who had held my hand at Bernard's funeral. From inside the house, I heard Blake's voice laughing. I climbed into the back seat. My dress caught on the door frame, but I bunched it up and pressed it down, folding myself into a space that suddenly felt far too small. Frederick handed me the blanket. It was soft, dark, and heavy. "Cover yourself completely," he whispered. "He cannot see you." I pulled the blanket over my head and the world went dim. I could hear my own breathing, loud and fast, while my heart hammered against my ribs. The door closed softly, and then I heard him. Blake was ready. "Ready to go, Fred," he said, his voice bright and full of excitement. "Yes, sir," Frederick replied, sounding perfectly calm. "Right on schedule." The passenger door opened, and the seat shifted as Blake slid in. His cologne filled the car, sharp and clean, the same scent Bernard used to wear. Man, Blake laughed. I cannot believe I am actually doing this, getting married. It is a big day, Mr. Blake, Frederick said. The biggest. Blake's voice softened. I just wish Dad were here. He would probably have some joke about me finally settling down. My throat tightened, and I pressed my hand over my mouth to stay silent. Your father would be very proud, Frederick said quietly. The engine started and the car began to move. There I was, dressed for my son's wedding, hiding under a blanket and listening to Blake's happy voice while wondering what truth I was about to discover. He had no idea his world was about to shatter, and neither did I. The car had been moving for maybe 10 minutes when Blake's phone rang. I could not see anything from under the blanket, just darkness and the faint glow of morning light bleeding through the fabric. But I could hear everything, the hum of the engine, the soft rustle of Blake shifting in his seat, and the sharp buzz of his phone vibrating against the dashboard. It is Natasha, Blake said, and I heard the smile in his voice. Hey babe, I am on my way to the church. He must have put her on speaker because suddenly her voice filled the car, smooth, sweet, and perfectly warm. Good morning, handsome, Natasha said. How are you feeling? Nervous? Blake laughed. But good nervous, you know? Like this is really happening. It is, she replied, but her tone shifted slightly. I could not quite place it. After today, everything changes. I frowned beneath the blanket. Everything changes. The words themselves were normal, something any bride might say, but the way she said it felt off. There was something underneath that did not sound like joy. Blake did not seem to notice. I cannot wait to start our life together, he said. You mean the whole future? There was a pause, just a beat too long. Yeah, Natasha finally said. Finally. Our life. Finally. Why did that word sound so wrong? I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to slow my breathing. You are overthinking this, Margot, I told myself. You were hiding in a car because Frederick told you to, and now you are reading into every word like a paranoid woman. Where's your mom? Natasha asked, her voice casual but curious. Blake answered easily, explaining that I was coming separately because I wanted some time alone to process. I think you know how moms get emotional, he added. My throat tightened at his words. Good, Natasha said, then softer, almost to herself. That is good. Why would it be good that I was not there? Blake's phone buzzed again with a different sound, an incoming call trying to break through. Hang on, babe, Blake said. Someone is trying to call me. Who? Natasha's voice sharpened instantly. I do not know, it is an unknown number, Blake dismissed it. Probably a spam call. Anyway, where were we? They kept talking about the reception, the flowers, and whether Blake remembered his boutonniere. It was normal wedding day chatter, but I barely heard it because Blake's phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. This time, Blake's voice changed just slightly. That is weird. Same number. Ignore it, Natasha said quickly. Too quickly. It is your wedding day. You do not have time for telemarketers. Yeah, you are right, Blake replied, but he sounded uncertain. They said their goodbyes, exchanged I love yous, and Blake hung up. Silence filled the car for maybe 30 seconds, and then the phone rang again. It was not a buzz this time, but a full, loud ring. For the love of, Blake muttered as he grabbed the phone. I heard him check the screen. Same number, third time. What? The hell? Frederick's voice came calm from the driver's seat. Do you want me to pull over, sir? No, I will just answer it, Blake said, his voice clipped. Hello? I could not hear the person on the other end, but I heard Blake's response. I told you not to call this number. His voice dropped low, not angry, but scared. Actually, he sounded terrified. I told you I would handle it. Stop calling me. He hung up fast. The car felt suddenly smaller and tighter. Everything all right, Mr. Blake? Frederick asked, his tone perfectly neutral. Blake forced a laugh, but it came out hollow. Yeah, just wedding stress. You know how it is. Of course, sir, Frederick replied. But I could hear it, the tremor underneath Blake's words and the way his breathing had quickened. My son was scared, and he was lying to Frederick, to himself, and maybe even to me. Who is that? I wanted to scream. Who is calling you? What aren't you telling me? But I stayed silent, frozen, and listening. Frederick's voice came again, gentle. Are you sure you are all right, sir? I am fine, Fred, Blake said, his voice cracking on the word fine. Just let's get to the church. I need to marry Natasha. Everything will be fine once I marry her. Once I marry her. It sounded like marriage was a finish line, a solution, or a way to make something stop. My chest felt like someone had wrapped a band around it and pulled it tight. What are you running from, Blake? And why do you think marrying Natasha will save you? The car kept moving, and I kept listening. The car slowed and then turned. I felt the shift in direction, the pull to the left when we should have been going straight. Even hidden beneath the blanket, I had memorized the route to the cathedral. My husband's funeral had been held there, as had Blake's baptism. Every major moment of our family's life had happened in that building. This was not the way, Fred, Blake said, his voice carrying uncertainty. Where are we going? Slight detour, sir, Frederick answered smoothly. Blake's phone chimed with a text message alert. Oh, Blake's tone shifted, relief mixing with concern. It is Natasha. She says, hang on. I heard him reading aloud, the way he always did when he was stressed. Emergency at friend's house. Need you to pick me up before church. He paused. She sent an address. Is everything all right? Frederick asked. I do not know, she says it is urgent. Blake's voice tightened. Fred, can we make a quick stop? I need to get Natasha. Of course, sir. Frederick's response came too easily and too prepared. He knew. Frederick knew this would happen. The car turned again. The smooth hum of the highway pavement became the rougher texture of neighborhood streets. I felt every bump and every pothole. This is it, Blake sounded confused. This neighborhood is, Natasha's friends usually live in. He trailed off. I knew what he meant. Natasha's circle lived in gated communities with tree-lined streets. This was not that. The car stopped. I'll be right back, Blake said. She told me to wait inside in the living room. The door opened and closed, and I heard footsteps on the pavement growing fainter. Then Frederick's voice came, low and urgent. Mrs. Hayes, come out now. I pushed the blanket off and light flooded in. The morning sun was almost blinding after so long in the darkness. I blinked hard as my eyes adjusted. Frederick stood at the open door, his hand extended to help me out. I took it, feeling my legs go stiff from being curled up. My dress was wrinkled beyond repair, but I did not care. Frederick, I hissed, keeping my voice low. What is this? Where are we? He did not answer, but simply pointed. I followed his gesture to a small, single-story house painted pale yellow. It was maybe 30 years old, the lawn needed mowing, and a child's bike lay on its side near the garage. There at the end of the driveway was a mailbox with black letters on white, the Collins family. I stared at it and read it again. Collins, I whispered. Natasha's last name is Quinn. Frederick's expression stayed grim. Look at the house, Mrs. Hayes. I did. Blake stood at the front door and knocked. The door opened and Natasha appeared, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater with her hair in a ponytail. She looked nothing like the polished woman who had been at our house days ago. She smiled at Blake and gestured for him to come inside. Wait here, babe, I heard her say. I just need to grab my things from upstairs. The door closed. I turned to Frederick, my pulse hammering in my throat. What is going on? Who lives here? Frederick's jaw tightened. It is not about who lives here, Mrs. Hayes. It is about who Natasha comes here to see. What are you talking about? He pointed again, not to the front door, but to a smaller side entrance. Watch that door, Frederick said. Not the front, the side. Why? What am I looking for? I asked. His hand gripped my arm gently but firmly. Just watch. She does not know we are here. She does not know you are about to see who she really is. My breath caught. The Collins family, a house Blake had never been to, and a side door I was supposed to watch. What was I about to see? Frederick, I whispered, my voice shaking. What is through that side door? He did not answer. He just watched the house, waiting. And so, I did the same. 10 minutes felt like 10 hours as I crouched behind Frederick's sedan, my knees pressed against the cold concrete. The neighborhood was quiet, with only the sound of birds chirping and distant traffic. Nothing about this street matched the world Blake and I inhabited. At exactly 8 o'clock, the side door opened. Natasha stepped out, moving with quick efficiency. There was no grace and no pretense. This was not the radiant bride-to-be. This was someone else entirely. Mommy. A little girl burst through the doorway, her blonde curls bouncing. She was maybe 5 years old and threw her arms around Natasha's legs. Do you have to go? My breath stopped. Mommy. Natasha knelt down, her voice softening. Just for today, sweetheart. Then everything will be different. A man appeared, looking worn and exhausted. Brett Collins, according to the mailbox. He looked at Natasha with desperate resignation. He called again, Brett said. If we do not pay him by Monday. Not now, Natasha cut him off sharply. Blake is inside in the front room. Brett's face crumpled. You are really doing this, marrying him? He shook his head. He seems like a good man. He does not deserve. His goodness will not pay Randall. Natasha's words were like ice. His family's money will. The Hayes estate, the hotels, the accounts. That is what keeps our daughter safe. She stepped closer. 1 year of marriage, a clean divorce, and we are free. Randall gets paid and we disappear. I pressed my fist against my mouth. His family's money. Bernard's legacy. Blake's inheritance. She wanted to steal it all. Brett stared at the ground. I do not like this. You do not have to like it, Natasha said as she pulled him close and kissed him. It was not a polite gesture, it was real. They were a family. You just have to trust me, Daddy, she said. The little girl tugged at his shirt, asking for pancakes. Brett's voice broke as he told her to go inside. As the child skipped away, something shattered inside my chest. That innocent girl had no idea her mother was about to destroy another family to save their own. Natasha, Blake's voice called from inside the house. You ready? We should get to the church. I watched Natasha transform. The hard edges melted, the calculating gleam disappeared, and suddenly she was the gentle fiancée again. The mask fit perfectly. She slipped back through the side door and moments later emerged from the front with Blake at her side. He wrapped his arm around her, completely unaware she had just kissed another man and discussed his financial ruin. Let's take my car, baby, Natasha said. I want to drive us to the church together, just you and me. Blake's face softened. Yeah, that's really sweet. I'll text Frederick to meet us there. Within moments, her car pulled away, taking my son toward a trap. I stepped out from behind the sedan, my legs shaking, but my resolve absolute. If you are going to talk to Mr. Collins, do it now, Frederick said. I walked to the front door and knocked. The door opened, and Brett Collins looked at me with confusion. Can I help you? My name is Margot Hayes, I said. I believe you know my son, Blake. Color drained from his face as his hand gripped the door frame. I held up my phone showing Blake and Natasha's engagement photo. Brett staggered backward. Oh God, she is really doing it. I stepped into the modest living room. In the corner, the little girl, Zoe, sat playing. Tell me everything right now, I commanded. Brett's eyes were hollow with defeat. She is my wife, his voice cracked. Legally, we have been married for 4 years. The words hit hard. Blake had only known her for 2. She said marrying into your family would solve everything, Brett admitted. He explained the debts, the medical bills from Zoe's birth, and a man named Randall Turner who had loaned them money. She researched your family, Brett said. She saw an opportunity. She spent months planning this. The deceptive facade of the wedding ceremony had finally begun to rot from the inside out. As I stood before the congregation, the weight of the manila folder in my purse felt like a physical anchor to the truth. Blake's face was a map of devastation, his eyes, so hauntingly like his father's, searching mine for any sign that this was a cruel joke. But there was no joke. There was only the calculated betrayal of a woman who had hunted my family like prey. Natasha's polished exterior didn't just crack, it disintegrated. The woman who had claimed to share Blake's passion for charity and nonprofit work was gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal. This is insane, she shrieked, her voice losing its melodic warmth. You're ruining everything, Margot. Blake, don't listen to her. She's been trying to push me away since the day we met. I didn't blink. I didn't raise my voice. I simply reached into my bag and produced the evidence that Frederick and I had secured. I walked up the altar steps, the clicking of my heels the only sound in the suffocating silence of the cathedral. I held up the marriage certificate, the state seal gleaming under the stained glass light. This isn't an opinion, Natasha, I said, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. This is a legal document. You've been married to Brett Collins for 4 years. You aren't a bride, you're a bigamist and a fraud. The guests erupted. The scandalous murmur grew into a roar of disbelief. Blake staggered backward as if I had struck him, his hand falling away from Natasha's. Just then, the heavy doors at the back of the church groaned open. Frederick had timed it perfectly. Brett Collins walked down the center aisle, his hand clutched tightly by a 5-year-old girl with blonde curls. The sight of them was the final blow. Little Zoe, wearing a simple sundress that looked tragically out of place among the designer silk and lace of the wedding guests, looked up at the woman in the white dress. Her voice, high and innocent, pierced through the chaos. "Mommy? You look like a princess." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of 1,000 hearts stopping at once. Natasha's face went from pale to a ghostly gray. She looked at Zoe, then at Brett, then at the millions of dollars in assets that were slipping through her fingers. "Who is this man, Natasha?" Blake whispered, his voice breaking. "Who is that child?" Brett reached the altar, his face etched with guilt. "I'm sorry," he said, looking at Blake. "She told me this was the only way to save us. To pay back the people we owe. She was going to take your money and come back to us." Blake looked at the woman he loved, the woman who had promised to be his future, and saw a stranger. The betrayal was complete. The perfect Natasha Quinn was nothing more than a ghost, a character played by a woman who had seen my son's grief as a doorway to his bank account. "You are lying. You have to be lying. Mom, tell me he is lying." I caught Blake's arm, holding him steady as his entire world crumbled in an instant. "I am so sorry, sweetheart," I whispered, my heart breaking for him. "I am so sorry, but it is the truth. I saw them together this morning. I spoke with Brett myself. I have the proof right here." Blake's face shifted from frozen shock to pure devastation. He turned toward Natasha, his voice breaking into 1,000 pieces. "Natasha, tell me he is lying. Please, just tell me this isn't true. Tell me you love me. Tell me any of this was real." Natasha's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. Only dark rivers of mascara began to streak down her carefully painted face. Brett looked on with a heavy gaze. "I am truly sorry, Blake," he said. "You seem like a good man. You don't deserve this. But she's been planning this for months. She targeted you at that fundraiser because of your family's wealth. We owe money to dangerous people, and she said marrying you would solve everything." The silence that followed was more brutal than any scream. Blake whispered her name one last time, a plea for a denial that never came. Finally, Natasha collapsed to her knees, her white roses scattering across the marble steps. I addressed her firmly. "You owe him an explanation." "Why him?" "I didn't have a choice." She sobbed. My voice stayed cold, cutting through her excuses. "There is always a choice, Natasha." Blake's voice was raw as he asked the question that haunted him. "Did you ever love me? Or was every kiss and every promise just an act?" Natasha looked down at her hands, unable to meet his eyes. That silence was the most devastating confession of all. Suddenly, 2 police officers walked down the center aisle. Frederick had made the call. "Natasha Quinn, you are under arrest for marriage fraud, bigamy, and identity theft," the officer stated. As the handcuffs clicked shut, Zoe's frightened voice echoed through the cathedral. "Mommy, where are they taking Mommy?" The officers led Natasha away, her white dress trailing behind her like a ghost. Once the doors closed with a heavy thud, the cathedral fell into a profound silence. 3 months later, life looked different. Blake was not healed completely, but he was lighter. He was focusing on work and rebuilding his trust slowly with the help of therapy. He even started calling Frederick Uncle Fred. I sat in my office, looking at a photo of Bernard. "We did it, Bernard," I whispered. "Our son is safe. Natasha is serving 5 years, and Brett and Zoe are finally safe from the threats they once faced. I don't regret what I did. I stood at that altar because I had the strength to speak a truth that shattered a lie. One painful moment of truth is always better than a lifetime of suffering from lies. I protected my family, just as I promised I would."